Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. So today's episode was supposed to be about Sleeping with Sirens. That episode will now be pushed to next week in light of some recent events within the emo, pop punk, hardcore community. We are doing a little bonus extra episode honoring the life, the legacy, and learning, if you're like me and you're new to his story fully, we're going to learn about his life as we honor and give respect where it is due to Dave Shapiro. If you are not already familiar with who he is after the last 2 weeks, you probably have become familiar. But if you were like me and hearing his name and stories about him was fairly new because you're new to the history of the scene and some of the behind the scenes of the bands that we love. If you ever attended Warped Tour, if you have ever screamed your heart out to any mainstream emo pop punk band, then you can thank Dave Shapiro for those experiences and the connection that you've been able to create with these bands that you love. A lot of their success can point to this one key player that had such an impact and will continue to have an impact on this entire industry. So today we are going to talk about his life. We're going to talk about his impact within the scene. We'll briefly hit on some of the events that have happened, but the goal really is to honor the legacy and as a community in this space, learn about who he is and now be able to open our eyes and see his impact as we continue to enjoy the music that we all love so deeply and enjoy as much as we possibly can. So Shapiro grew up in upstate New York. So he was part of that kind of straight edge hardcore scene, which was this kind of post hardcore movement that did not use drugs or alcohol in reaction to kind of mainstream punk. We see a lot of some of these kind of scene bands, emo pop punk bands in that space as well. We haven't talked about quite as many of them. Under Oath, you would probably consider there at the beginning. Obviously, that was not true behind the scenes. But this is, one subgenre of this industry that exists. And Dave was part of that growing up. In high school, that led to him, like any emo kid and scene kid would do, starting a band with his friends called Count the Stars. He was the drummer of the band, and they actually got signed to Victory Records right when they graduated high school. Pretty successful and impressive in that kind of Northeast community and pop punk, post punk, whatever you want to call it, community. They toured for a few years. And throughout that time, like with touring, he started building connections and relationships within the music industry. As we will uncover throughout his career, he was is a very friendly person and is all about connections and people first. Maybe the fact that he wasn't on drugs or drinking all the time was part of that. Who knows? That would have been great to uncover a bit more, but he truly did care about people and the heart of the scene and the community, which were the people that were involved in it. And so he began to build those relationships and build that community himself through his experience in the scene through touring. Like most bands during this time, whenever touring kind of became too much and things just weren't really panning out the way that they hoped, he decided instead of just leaving the scene completely, instead of going and joining a different band, pivoting there, he decided to take a bit of a pivot into the business and industry side of the scene. He once told Polestar in a 2011 interview, "I realized I loved the business side even more than performing. I was fascinated by how tours were put together, and I wanted to help the bands I love get on the road and reach more people." So in the early 2000s, he joined the agency group and quickly built a roster that reflected his ear for the next big thing in rock, emo, and metal. That was his space. Again, the space that we all love so deeply. In a 2015 interview, he said, "I was always a fan first. If I believed in an artist, I want to help them play in front of as many people as possible." So this time he was a booking agent. And because he was so passionate about these bands and found his kind of niche within the scene, he ended up being pretty successful throughout the early 2000s. And so in 2017, he co founded Sound Talent Group, which was an independent booking agency that allowed him to have a lot more freedom to the different agents and more care to the artists that he worked with. He wanted that more close relationship first, again, person, people first relationship with the bands that he worked with. And so he was able to do that on his own and kind of pave that path. This was considered a pretty bold move because during this part of time in the music industry as a whole, corporate consolidation was the norm. So people going out on their own and being more independent wasn't necessarily the quote unquote smart thing to do, and wasn't always successful. A lot of independent people were kind of becoming part of these bigger groups, but he decided to go a different way, like a true emo kid, right? Like a scene kid, like a punk kid, really rewriting what those roles could look like. He mentioned in a Polestar interview that, we wanted to create a place that felt more human. Artists aren't just clients, they're people with dreams, families, and fears. So he continued to advocate for artists and bands at every single level, from the arena acts, so the big ones, as well as those who were playing in basements, living out of a van. And he's known now, the impact he's made was is so tied to his loyalty to his bands and his artists, no matter what, no matter where they were in their journey, in their experience, in their stardom, fandom, whatever it may be. Thomas Guches, the manager for the bands Beartooth and Archetypes Collide, said Shapiro's success is in part due to his exceptional kindness and willingness to lend a hand in a competitive industry that often produced big egos. He had a tattoo that read, "We're people first, we're blank second." Shapiro gave him opportunities when he was just a newcomer in the industry, fresh out of high school. So, part of the reputation that he built from himself on the industry side of connection, collaboration, helping, uplifting others, not competitive and overstepping others. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. My husband actually started in the music industry, in music business. He did, it doesn't really matter all the jobs, but it was more on the finance business side. But he worked for a record label for a short amount of time as well, in the country scene primarily. And it was one of the most toxic environments I've ever seen in terms of professionalism. There was a lot of bullying. It was very much tied to who you know, what you can offer, pay little, overworked, and constantly reminded that you were replaceable and that you should be grateful. There was just a lot of manipulation and um, cattiness and just weird competition in that environment. And thankfully, he got out of it. But I remember watching that as an outsider and kind of being two-faced people could be. And that was only for with a brief bit of experience. I know that that had to be even more true, in this scene and to the level that he was operating. And so to be able to have a reputation of kindness and collaboration and helping other people, and also seeing people as people, and even from the artists that you're working with, being highly respected and friends with those artists while still doing business together. That is very unique in the music industry. It is very special and something that Dave embodied, he lived, and is part again of his legacy that will continue to go on even now and throughout many, 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 many years to come. So during his career, in the industry side. One of his most pivotal roles actually came with the Vans Warped Tour. If you've ever been to Warped Tour, this is for you. This was the person you should write a thank you letter to. He was one of the lead booking agents for the festival during the golden years, and his fingerprints were all over the lineup. So bands like A Day to Remember, Bring Me the Horizon, Sleeping with Sirens, Paramore. Dave had a hand in bringing them to your local fairgrounds and getting them on those stages, which were pivotal to even their careers, but also important for our scene community and the legacy of pop punk and emo as a whole. He was a key figure in the mid 2000s emo explosion, helping bands go from MySpace to sold out headlining tours. That was his bread and butter, and he did it very well. Kellen Quinn of Sleeping with Sirens said in an interview once, Dave believed in us before anyone else did. He booked our first real tour. No one else was taking that chance. He had a knack for seeing talent before it exploded and helping it get there, which again is so special and is also a skill to be able to do. And he did it from being a part of the band. I think because if you see people as they are, if you're connecting to the people involved, you're going to see potential a lot easier than if you are only thinking about business and the bottom line or, what's right in front of you at that moment, which is probably what made him so special and was that secret sauce that he had. And his client list did reflect that. He worked with a lot of clients within the pop punk scene, but also across different genres, some within our scene, A Day to Remember, Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, Bring Me the Horizon, Under Oath, Motionless in White, Black Veiled Brides, Falling in Reverse, so many more. I believe Hanson was one of them, Vanessa Carlton. So right across many, many, many genres, he was able to work with them and again, have such a strong reputation and relationship with them. He played a huge role in helping bands break out and cross over to mainstream success, whether that means putting together the right support package, locking in the festival slots, believing in a band before anyone else did. He had a sixth sense of what would work, and he often was right on what he thought would be successful. He was also instrumental in shaping the now legendary Taste of Chaos and Mayhem Festival tours, which became career launching platforms for bands in the mid 2000s. So, kind of funneling past the Warped Tour era, these tours that came after that. He was a major part of that. In 2012, he was included in Billboard's 30 Under 30 list, recognizing rising stars in entertainment. And he was highly renowned within the industry, spoke on stages, was invited to panels, was very involved in the conversations around the industry and what the potential could be for the industry and the scene as it moved forward. In a 2015 panel at South by Southwest, Dave said, my job is to build sustainable careers. Anyone can book a tour, but it's about being strategic, knowing when to go big and when to hold back. It's chess, not checkers. And then in 2021, on a music industry podcast, he said, finding something you love to do is only going to make you do a better job because you actually care. You're not just showing up for the paycheck. It's not a 9 to 5. This is part of living your life if you really love it. So the blending of passion, loving the job itself, loving the people, with also a creative, strategic, brilliant mind, the perfect combination for success. Not only did Dave love and have a passion for the music industry and helping bands succeed, he also developed a passion for aviation and flying. So he did an intro flight at age 22 and became instantly hooked and obsessed with flying. He seemed to love music and flying with equal passion, at one point even opening an office for the talent agency at a hangar, like an air hangar in San Diego. He mentioned in a 2020 podcast interview, flying helps me focus and helps me not be distracted by the nonsense in the world. And whatever's going on outside the plane kind of doesn't matter in those moments. So it's his way of mindfulness, connection into himself, joy, all of those things, which hobbies should offer you. And that was part of his life. He went on to own a flight school and start a flight school called Velocity Aviation and his record label, Velocity Records. He offered flights in both San Diego and Homer, Alaska, where he and his wife, Julia Pollock Shapiro, owned a home, according to some of his online posts, with his wife. So, with the kind of recap on his legacy and stories told by close friends and relationships that were all close to his family, he and his wife met and fell in love based on their love for adventure, of new experiences, of continuing to try new things. And they actually got married in 2016, kind of highlighting this love together. They were married in the small town of Talkeetna, Alaska, but then they picked up their wedding licenses, got on a plane, and flew to a glacier inside Denali National Park, landing with skis strapped to the plane's wheels, showcasing the life that they would lead together. And they seemed to have that kind of relationship that was anchored in that adventure together. Unfortunately, Dave did pass away unexpectedly in May, just a week or so ago, 2025, leaving a massive hole in the heart of the alternative music community. He was only 50 years old, and he was on a flight at that time. It was not his fault. The investigations so far are probably pointing more towards the fault of just the environment. It was a foggy environment, and the air traffic control and the airport for landing. The lights weren't on, the communication wasn't great, there was limited visibility, and the plane wrecked from power lines into a neighborhood in San Diego, and he was on board. After this happened, very quickly, tributes began to pour in from the band's agents and the fans all across the industry, not even just in the emo pop punk hardcore scene, but spanning across the entire industry. This was what was brought to my attention and where I've been able to learn more about him, his legacy, and the really special memories that people hold. I'm grateful to have that. I wish I had known about him sooner. And my hope is that this podcast helps those of you who are in a similar boat as me learn a little bit more about who he was and take a bit of that legacy on, and kind of uphold some of those same values and things that he really poured into the world, right? That we can keep carrying on. But looking back at what some people have said about Dave, Ronnie Radke of Falling in Reverse tweeted, "Dave was not just an agent, he was a friend. He believed in me when many didn't. I'm devastated. All these guys that bring me the horizon. Warped Tour, sold out tours, festival slots we never dreamed of. That was Dave." Kevin Lyman, the founder of Warped Tour, he was one of the people that made Warped Tour what it became. He cared, really cared about the bands. Pierce the Veil wrote collectively, "We are shattered. Dave was more than an agent. He was our guide, our cheerleader, and our friend. We wouldn't be where we are today without him." Sleeping with Sirens, Kellen Quinn posted, "He fought for us when no one else would. He was honest, brilliant, and truly cared. Rest easy, Dave." Looking at Pierce the Veil and Sleeping with Sirens specifically, Dave was actively involved, even with Pierce the Veil, a co-manager of their band currently. And they had just together, those two bands, performed a career highlight show at Madison Square Garden. The belief is that this was the flight from New York back to San Diego for himself and some others on his team and friendships of the band. So this is a big loss for their communities. He played a big impact and was part of this kind of momentous point in their career that they're continuing to live through their tour currently. So sending a lot of thoughts, love, whatever, nothing really helps in times of grief, truly, but really sharing as much as we can, and everyone sending as much love, support to these bands as they press on without such a valuable member of their team and keep carrying his legacy in their own grief. There were even bands outside of his roster like Bad Omens, All Time Low, Paramore, who shared condolences, just showing how far the reach went. And then on LinkedIn, one promoter wrote, "Dave Shapiro was the guy who picked up the phone. He didn't care if you were a big buyer or a small club. If he believed in the music, he believed in you. This was stated, in a lot of different interviews and articles written about Dave, is that even with bands, he took time to listen. He gave people a chance, again, really highlighting the value of the person in front of him, the creator in front of him, which is so incredibly special. So looking at Vic Fuentes of Pierce the Veil and his wife, Danielle Fuentes, over the last week, they have been sharing, especially Danielle has been sharing intimate memories with Dave, their friendship together, their families together, as well as some of the others on the flight that we'll honor before we end today. Vic even mentioned that Pierce the Veil stayed with Dave at his home between shows during tours, not because they had to, but because they want to. They regularly spent time together, even outside of work. They were truly family, not just coworkers. And there will be a lot missed again, and a lot of grief that we hope that they walk through as best as they can, which is all that you can hope and wish in a period of grief. Dave Shapiro's legacy isn't just about the bands that he booked, it's about the chances he gave people, the risk he took for people, and the love he poured into a scene that gave so many of us a home for people. Craig Mabbitt of Escape the Fate said a lot of agents are great at business, but Dave gave a shit. That's rare. He cared, truly. So Dave Shapiro may not have had his name in lights. He may not have been the most famous. If you didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, you may have never heard of him. Maybe like me, where you maybe have recognized his name or seen his face, but you didn't know his true impact. He wasn't celebrated as big as some of the artists that he supported, but he helped light the way for dozens of bands that now define the emo and pop punk eras that we grew up on. His legacy lives on in every sold out venue, every kid singing along in the front row, and every tour that almost didn't happen until Dave made it happen. So to everyone who has loved the scene, who continues to love the scene, who is falling in love with the scene, remember the names behind the scenes too, because people like Dave Shapiro are the glue that have held it all together, that have made it what it is, and will continue to push it forward, even in his physical absence on Earth. He will always be part of it, which is the beautiful thing about people who actually care and build this type of community, which is really beautiful about the emo, pop punk, post hardcore communities as a whole. I feel like they're special within the music industry, anyways. So, in honoring Dave's legacy, I also want to remember the others that are lost in the tragic accident. It is an accident, and we don't want to harp on that too much. But honoring these families, and even as we talk through their names, Danielle Fuentes has shared a few GoFundMe campaigns to support the families of these people who are all part of our industry in some way. And so, any way that you can show love, support to these families as well, financially support if you're able to kind of back them, go to those trusted sources. Again, Danielle Fuentes has been a great source for that. We have Daniel Williams, the former drummer for The Devil Wears Prada, Kendall Fortner and Emma Huke, who are both employees of Shapiro's Sound Talent Group agency. Selena Marie Rose Kenyon, a professional photographer, loved mother, very close friend of the Fuentes. And Dominic Christopher Damien, a close friend of Dave's, who was heavily involved in the martial arts community in San Diego. So remembering them, rest in peace. You will all be missed. Dave, you will be missed within this community, and your legacy will continue to live on. So next week, we will resume with Sleeping with Sirens, and then we will move into our recaps of the Pierce the Veil Sleeping with Sirens tour. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It gets postponed. We'll see. I believe they are still playing shows since the accident has happened. That will be something where we'll scream a little louder, cry a little more, bleed our hearts out even more, knowing that so much of what we enjoy is due to the legacy of this man that we continue to honor, which is even more special. So we will come and recap that after the show, and then get into the Jax Mannequin show, recap that for you, and then keep pressing forward with some more emo pop punk legends that we want to learn more about. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in our next class.